Good evening, everyone. Let's see who we got in the house tonight. We've got Rebecca Touched by Yarn, Evelyn Newman. Empire Strikes Back is already
house tonight.
Second
We've got Rebecca Touched by Yarn, Evelyn Newman.
Just a second.
Empire Strikes Back is already house tonight. We've got Rebecca Touched by Yarn, Evelyn Newman.
Just a second.
Empire Strikes Back is already house tonight. We've got Rebecca.
Okay, I had YouTube on behind the screen. So, all right. Let's see. Petite Joan River Homestead. That flustered me having that thing flickering in the back. Full Blown Country. Paul Honeyman's in the house. We got Dysfunction Junction Ranch. Well, before I screw this up anymore, I better just get Kaleb in here. Boy. Start off like that, I already started stumbling on things. So how are you doing this evening?
Doing great. Yourself?
Pretty good. I know that you've been working all day long, chiseling on something, right?
Every day. If I'm not dusty, it's not a good day.
Where's my volume low? Okay. So you were out there working on that stonework in the back, right?
Yeah, the stone foundation of my house needs a lot of work. And I started out working on a door, and then you realize that the door won't be straight unless you fix the stone behind it. So every little project turns into a much bigger one really quickly.
Yeah, I could see that, and I feel your pain. And you know what? And I'm not even doing to the extent of what you're doing. I'm doing a farmhouse, and I pretty much could just rip the walls off and redo them because they were crumbling pretty bad. And there was no insulation, and the wiring all had to be redone. So I couldn't justify trying to work around trim that was pretty much replaceable anyway.
Yeah, it's a little bit, I guess, different here, but I still think most people, when they do a house of this age, 1890, even then, most people just rip it out and start over. But that has a lot of complications within itself. So,
yeah, it does. If you took everything off the house that I took off over the duration of working on this house, it would be a skeleton. I've taken just about everything off. All the windows were replaced and even moved into different places. So something happened last weekend that was pretty cool, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think so.
I think so too. You got a pretty girl there.
Oh yeah. So yeah, me and the girlfriend, now wifey, got married. It was a cool little wedding. A lot of people, but little budget. I had it at my grandma's place, the place I grew up, the area I know really well, the place I would consider home to me. And it was just family and friends. I had a bunch of friends fly in from California, and my best buddy from Germany flew in. It was just a great time.
Just a quick little get together, but people are coming from Germany.
Well, hey, when you got friends all over like I do, you know.
Yeah,
and that is my best friend. So,
well, that's awesome. You know, I saw the pictures, and I like that it wasn't a cookie cutter wedding. I mean, you made it your own, and it's nice. She wore a green dress, pretty green dress with a floppy hat, probably inspired from the era you're working in, right?
A little bit. She kind of ended up looking a bit more 70s, and I looked a lot more like 1900. But somehow it worked out, you know.
But the inspiration was there. That's all that counts.
Definitely. Well, she wanted a dress that she could wear again. I like the idea of not buying something that I would wear once. Yeah. And so, like, the inspiration behind mine is, well, I give tours of the house all the time. Why not look the part? So I got the starting pieces for the outfit I'll wear when I give tours here.
And she's been right there by your side, working her butt off right with you. I love
Not as much recently. She's got a new job, so.
Yeah, well, I see her a lot in those videos. I love seeing these couples working together as a team. They do very well.
It's fun. She's super supportive of the whole project, and more than anything, I found the girl that at least tolerate this insanity that I'm trying to pull off. And more than that, she really does like the place too. It wasn't really her goal at the start, but with a bit of persuasion and telling her like how much space we would have and how beautiful things would be, she really gets it now. So I mean, she saw me do the bathroom and she's really happy with that. So she's gonna, I think, let me continue on the path.
That looks amazing. It's amazing. I love the tile work.
It came out really well. It's the second tile job I've ever done, so I'm happy with myself.
You know, I look at some of the things that you're doing, and you probably have to come up with. Well, what I'm trying to say is, you know how you mounted the sink? How do you know what materials you would use to hook those bolt or glue or fasten those bolts to the bottom of it?
Well, just tons of research. So I guess it's not terribly uncommon for people to have underhung bowls on marble sinks. So it's still a marble sink and it's still a porcelain bowl. So I guess the same things would apply. Interesting enough, Lowe's sold all the stuff you would need. So you just rough up the stone in the sections you're going to be epoxying those little clips on there too, and it holds really, really well. What they did back in the day, I'm not entirely sure. It seems like they drilled up into the marble and then filled it back in with some paste and put a part of a bolt in there, and then so you would just wing nut it on, or at least that's how the original clips were done. So I mean that's interesting, but I didn't want to try to drill new holes into the marble, so the epoxy route seemed a little. Maybe it's cheating, but
yeah,
I don't
you
want to tempt fate.
Talking about the clawfoot tubs because both of us are dealing with a clawfoot tub.
Oh,
but yours has a wood trimmer on the top, where mine is more of the. I don't know, when did they start making the? Well, they probably did at the same time, right?
Yeah. And I don't know if one was more deluxe than the other, but I just kind of like the wooden top. But the original Clawfoot that it was in the house is still here. It just has a lot of enamel coatings on it, like that plasticky paint that they put on old tubs sometime that doesn't really last very long. There's 3 coats of it on there, and I might try to strip it and see if it's salvageable. I've seen a little bit of rust staining around it, whereas I know that the wood rim tub is actually in pretty good shape. Dirty, but in decent shape.
Wicks, W-I W-I-C-K, I guess. I was wondering if it was an X or not, but it's W-I-C-K is a product that takes off rust really nice. I couldn't believe it. You pour it on there and the rust is gone.
All right. I've tried some other stuff like a vapor rust, but you just leave things in it and the rust comes off over time, which has worked really well for like screws and little pieces of hardware. But I can't soak an entire bathtub in it because that would cost me. Oof, it's a lot of money. I don't want to think about that.
Well, see, we were discussing whether we would keep them original or try to coat them. And both of us agreed that coating that stuff on a clawfoot tub is just not a great option because it wears off.
It doesn't last.
And it looks so plasticky too. So
that's my biggest problem with a lot of things.
In my story, in my case, with my clawfoot tub that I'm redoing, well, I'm not going to redo it. I'm going to clean it up the best it is. It doesn't have any chips. It's just kind of like it has it's not shiny. It's like a real matte finish. And I was looking online trying to figure out if I could buff it, use buffing wheels and buff it some and bring back some of that luster, but I haven't.
You know, that's interesting. I was just thinking today, but for something else, but
I haven't come up with a answer that makes me feel confident to do that.
I mean, you should be able to, right? Porcelain, you should be able to buff it, I imagine.
You'd buff on a
car,
car?
Right?
How much?
But is that just because it's paint? Were there porcelain enameled cars?
Probably not.
Pretty cool, right?
Oh, who knows? I don't know. Full Blown Country is in the house. Hey there, buddy. I was telling you some of the channels had changed in this lineup that I was talking about, and Full Blown Country is one of them, and he was on at the 7 o'clock hour just before the Homestead. So let's put
welcome.
I'll do a little plug on that guy. And 3 Mississippi took the 6 o'clock hour. So those are 2 new channels. MT Homestead have explained that pretty good, and so did Pooch. So I might make a mention at the end again about it, so people know that Family Night has changed a little bit, but it has not gone away. It's right here to stay. So, man, I actually wrote stuff down, people. It's just a list of stuff that I've seen this guy work on that interests me. This is having Kaleb on right now is showing you guys a little bit of the other side of me. You know that I work in the grapes and stuff like that, but the house stuff, that's what really has my interest. And I've always loved watching YouTube showing houses being built anywhere from the shed house all the way up to mansions and even aircrete domes. I love this stuff. And so here's one of the topics I would like to talk about is that medallion. Let's talk about that story, because that is amazing in so many different directions.
Well, so it's from my dining room. Actually, the room I'm currently sitting in, this is the dining room. I can look at the hole up there. And I was doing some wiring. And so I had some rather large holes, and was helping my father move some wood. And I kind of know how to move around my space because I'm in here by myself usually. And he just wasn't paying attention and stepped through the hole. Luckily, he was completely fine. But below that hole was the medallion, which was it's a really beautiful medallion. It has like grapes and maple leaves and little apricots and just a bunch of fruit and food products around it. And it's just a beautiful piece of art. And it fell, and luckily I had a bunch of crap in this room at the time. I was using it for storage, and it fell into a box of packing peanuts and mostly on a sofa. But it's still split into probably one large chunk and about 150 other pieces scattered across the room. So there were a few tears of that. Of course, after making sure my father was okay, and I got to work putting it back together. Turns out that if you want to glue plaster back together, you use Elmer's glue, which is still surprising to me that's the product you're supposed to use. It's what people use.
Like,
but it worked surprisingly well, really well. I was actually kind of blown away. That's one of those products that I think, no way this is going to work. Like this medallion weighs like, 40 pounds. There's no way if I pick it up, it's not going to slump back down. No, did fine. But yeah, and then I sculpted the missing parts back in, and it looks like it always did. I kind of impressed myself on that one. I did a lot of artistry, let's say, to get that back together. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I actually have to go fix somebody else in St. Louis. A friend of mine bought an old house, and they were working on it, and one of the really big medallions they have there fell. And so I'm gonna go have a look at it and see if I can work magic twice.
That's amazing. Well, okay. For one thing, you say 40 pounds, and it looks like it's about 40 pounds, but that was only held up there by the plaster of it. I mean, they plastered the ceiling, then they took this medallion and they connected it by smushing more plaster and just smushed it up, and it's amazing.
It worked.
So does that make it pretty solid? Like basically the ceiling plaster and the medallion become one at that point.
More or less, although they are technically two different types of plaster. The ceiling itself is lime plaster with animal hair in it, right? That's the most common stuff you would see, well, for the longest time, for most of human history. And so it's more flexible. The lime will move a little bit. It will crack, but usually not too bad. What the medallion's made of is gypsum plaster, or what everybody else knows it as, is plaster of Paris. Because when they put these things into the molds, because these are all molded first, the plaster of Paris will carry the mold shape better. And so you'll come out with a better looking product, which is why like the palettes of Versailles, Paris, looks really nice because they were able to get a lot of the details. But it's also less flexible and a bit more brittle. But yeah, they used a little bit of plaster of Paris pushed up against the raw lime plaster after it was dry. And yeah, stuck. And it stuck for, well, until my father put his foot through it. And really, most of the medallions don't really have any cracks or any kind of trouble at all in the house. This room that I'm in here got more water damage than some of the others. So we have some problems in the corners of the rooms. There is like a really big crown molding, plaster crown molding in this room. That's still up there and it's still good. But there are spots where it's come loose and come down as well. But the medallion was doing great until that time.
And unfortunately, you have several. Okay, there are many rooms in this house, and there are multiple medallions of other types.
Yeah,
but this was the only one that was unique.
yeah.
There were no others in the other rooms or anything. This is the only one that was like this.
Yep. So it was a requirement to get it back together. I mean, I guess I could have searched forever and found, I don't know, maybe a potential mold somewhere. I mean, it usually, like, this is the era, like maybe like 1870 to modern day, where you start getting into like interchangeable parts and mass producing of things. So I would say most every piece that's in this house isn't probably unique to it. In fact, I visited a church down the street, and in the rectory, they have the same marble or stone mantle that I have in my dining room here. They have that same stone mantle, and then they have the same tile that's from my parlor. So things were interchangeable. So I could probably look through a bunch of houses here in St. Louis. It was obviously a local company that did it. So it's potentially I could find a house that has either this medallion or something similar, but I didn't have that same part in my house. Whereas if a parlor, one of the medallions of the parlor dropped, well, there's two parlors, they share the same medallion. It's, they're identical. Same thing with the bedrooms upstairs. They have the same medallion in them as well. But this one was unique. And then I have one that's in the hallway, the entryway, that's unique to there's not another one in the house. So it was kind of a bummer. It would have been better if it had happened in a parlor, because I could have figured that out a bit easier. But luckily I had a mess in this room at the time, and I had somehow very luckily put a very soft piece of furniture in a box of packing peanuts underneath it. Of course, I wasn't expecting this to happen, but it was good that I had something underneath it to catch it. So it wasn't as bad as it could have been. If it had shattered into 1,000 pieces or just hit the floor, realistically, would I be able to get it back together? I mean, that would have more or less just be doing a clay sculpture and just guessing at details, because I don't think there's any other way around that.
Well, I tell you, you guys really need to check out his channel, because he's got stories like this. They're really interesting. What was I going to say about that? You were also explaining how it was kind of a blessing in disguise, because at least you get to work with this on a very intimate level, which you couldn't really do so much when it's up on the ceiling like that.
Well, I think actually that night that I was working on that, I had just in the corner while I was working, was watching a little documentary about the progress on Notre Dame in Paris. like all the restoration efforts after the fire. And everybody was saying like, okay, yes, this is a tragedy. It's awful that we have to go back and do these things and replace things that it would have been better to have the originals. But it does offer a very rare opportunity for people who are young or people who are just interested in these things to get up and close and personal to these objects, these things that are so high up. You couldn't, put scaffolding there all the time and really touch and feel these things. So getting that close to that history and being that intimate with an object was a rare opportunity for them. And so I feel I don't know, it was kind of like serendipitous as I was going through and doing this process. Like, how cool is it that I get to be the one who gets to fix this? I get to be part of this house's history. And I think that's with everything I do, but I was just really feeling in that moment, like, yes, it was bad, it happened, but I get to learn how to fix it. And then now, because this happened, I have that friend, like I said, he wants me to come help him do his. So I get to save another piece of history. And because of this skill I learned, I can now be of value to people around me.
That's awesome. And this leads, you said something that led this into a perfect segue. You've had several situations where people have actually come back to you and offered either furniture or tile or something that was original to the house that has left the house for decades.
Yeah, the biggest one, well, there's two. The big one really was the tiles. So my two parlors, I'm missing both of the fireplace mantles from there, and the tile surrounds and the tile that would go on the floor. I believe that would be called the hearth, although nobody quote me on that. So I'm missing all of those pieces. And I'd gotten really close at this point. This is very early on with Andy, who is the local curator of the Campbell House Museum, an amazing museum house here in town. Amazing. It's 1850s to 1880s styling, and they have that house put together exactly as it was. So, talking to him and other people who do houses like mine in the area know Andy. Everybody goes to the Campbell House. It's a good reference point. So one of the guys who frequents the Campbell House went over there and was talking to Andy, and he's like, "Hey, you got to check this kid's channel out." And he's like, "Oh, what's that kid's address?" He's like, "I think I might have something from his house because it looks familiar to me." And this guy was really studious about making sure he wrote down where everything came from. If you bought it off Craigslist, he asked the guys, "Hey, where did it come from?" Because he wants to know the story. He wants to know where it's from. And sure enough, they were the tiles from my house. When I went and put them back on the floor, beautiful emerald green roses for the hearth, so for the floor, and there were 3 or 4 little tiles left at the very back next to the firebox, and I put the tiles back in there, and they clicked into place, and I about lost it. It was really amazing. Like, it was incredible, and he gave them to me for the price he paid for them 10 years ago when they went missing. And like, things don't happen like that, and that's when I kind of realized how powerful the internet could be and word of mouth. And then you get really thankful for people like this gentleman who really do catalog the things they get in. And so as people do give me things, I catalog it. I want to know the story behind it. And people have given me, just amazing things. I've been very blessed, let's say, by my community. They've really rallied around me, and it's people don't have to do these things. I don't request these things, but people are just out of their kindness of heart. And I'm really blown away by that. The second item that I haven't quite gotten yet, but I've been told I will be getting, the second owner of my house, which was a veterinarian, and he had his office in the room directly below me in the basement. It's a beautiful tile floor down there, very 19-teens, 1920s style to the floor, mosaic. It's beautiful. But he ran part of his practice out of the basement. And when he died, his daughters took it on as a vet grooming station. And they did that all the way up to 1965. So from 1915 to 1965, cats, dogs, all these animals were in through here, either being helped by grooming by the daughters or by, surgeries and things like that, where he would care for the animals. And she still, and I met this lady recently who is the granddaughter of the two ladies of the veterinarian's daughters. They were her grandmas, and so she still has some of the furniture that was here in the house. So like the enamel tables, like the 1920s style, like enamel, like they look like surgical tables. She still has some, so they're the original ones from the house. And I was blown away that she said I could have those to put back here. And so it's another piece of this house that was from here that I think is absolutely incredible. Plus, I mean, that's not to mention all the things we found in the yard. I mean, we found dog tags from 1928, 1929, 6 of them, and they were the vaccine dog tags. And I know that the doctor, Dr. Ginneman, must have dropped them in the yard because they're all in a little area about like this. And then like you're like touching something, you're like, man, this is from one of the owners here. It's like so cool to see something they had, and it was just in the dirt.
He just answered that, Drew. He found dog tags.
We found a bunch of stuff in the yard. 1889 5 peso coin. 1889 be the year when the house was first starting to be built. We found a lock from the World's Fair that said St. Louis on it, which is another cool find. All kinds of pieces of cars, machinery. There's like a little oil pump for a machine, like an oil cup that you would pump into, like say, a steam engine. There was that. There's a little, it's kind of a cool little thing. I know it's kind of goofy, but it's just a little pack of coins from like the 50s, 60s that were all wrapped up in a little plastic bag. So, it was like some kid's allowance or something, like pennies and dimes. So all kinds of amazing things.
Wow. What did you find in the wall? Did you find anything amazing in the walls?
There was an old razor blade in the bathroom when I was renovating it from like the 30s. I think that's kind of cool. I found little samples of old wallpaper again in the bathroom in there, which I actually used to create the pattern for that bathroom. So it's an identical pattern to the one I found. Newspapers.
Yeah.
A lot of, because you would stuff newspaper in places just to cap holes. So again, to the veterinarian, he was German. So I found newspapers in both German and English, and they were all from 1923. And the bathtub was marked 1923. So I know that was the butler's pantry. It was modified in 1923 for sure, without a doubt.
Yeah, I've told this community before that in 1926, our house, the Vineyard Farmhouse, had been renovated. There was newspapers in the bathroom upstairs from 1926, and then there was an addition done in like 1942, and it was all insulated with 1942 newspaper. So all the stuff from the war is in this wall, and we kept it. I don't know where that is. I believe it's at my parents' house somewhere, or maybe it's over here in this room in the totes. I don't know. I'll have to look for it because I might want to actually do a video on that.
I think it's cool. And one thing that's kind of maybe sad about how we put houses back today is because people would use materials like that, which wouldn't be great to use in a house these days, but there's a timestamp there. So I tend to write on like little pieces of wood and stuff I have in there. I sign them, say hello.
Or you'll find like if there was a stovepipe hole that was covered over, and then you would find like a tin can that was cut out to an old tin can from the 1926 that was maybe a coffee can or whatever. I can't remember exactly what that was, but it was all tore up. But it was still interesting to find stuff like that.
Oh, we had beer cans here on the floor. It was like Indian Beer Company or something. But so interesting, at least, right? Then you can look that up and figure out the story. Where was the brewery? Is it local?
Well, doing metal detecting reminds me of the fact that this house that you're renovating right now was one of 2 houses. There was one identical one right next to it that has been torn down. And when was that?
I cannot get a full, clear answer to when exactly it was torn down. I believe sometime in the late 80s, maybe mid 90s. It's kind of hard to say. I've heard mid 90s, but the size of the tree that's in that or in my yard or split between the 2 yards leads me to believe it had to have at least been a little bit after that because it's a pretty big tree. And it would have been in the house at this point. So hard to say, but it was the two owners. So if you look at my hat here, this is Hall and Brown Woodworking and Machine Company. The house that's gone was Hall's. It was built 3 years before mine. Mine would have been for Brown. So it's the two business partners that came here from New Jersey to start this company. They were working at a company called HB Smith out there, which is a rather well-known company. Hall and Brown actually is fairly well-known by old machinists. Like there's a lot of them machines still around. And so I actually collect a lot of the woodworking machines, and I've been trying to put the house back together with as many of the original machines as possible. So like my mansard roof is shot right now and needs a lot of work. Of course, mansard roof, high pitched, dormers. That's kind of what a mansard roof is. I think Paris. So the guy hired to run the new mill work for the mansard is actually running it on Holland Brown equipment. So I think it's I don't know, it's a rare opportunity. I don't know of anybody who's putting an antique house like this back together. Cerro Gordo. Yeah, I've heard of. I have a Cerro Gordo hoodie. Really cool place. That's a bigger project than me. I have a single house, not a town. But I think it's cool. I get this opportunity to put, Mr. Brown's house back together with the tools he designed and made.
I was just watching one of the videos where you showed that because we've been having a drought up in this region, the footer to the Hall house shows up in the grass.
Yeah.
There's not enough soil there for the grass to thrive on, so it kind of leaves this ghostly shape of the house footprint.
Yeah, the front bay is still very visible. Even when it rains, sometimes it's still there. The grass, I mean, it must not be very deep, a few inches. It does turn back to stone right there, but it's crazy how perfectly it lines up with my house. And that lot itself, I don't personally own it yet. But it's definitely in the works to get that lot, because the story of these two men, they're so intertwined. And I feel like I'll be doing a disservice if I don't have that lot to tell not only Brown's story, but Hall's as well. Because, I mean, a little snippet of that, like when Hall died, Brown adopted his 13-year-old daughter to make sure she got her inheritance. The museum here, the local history museum, has a pocket watch that Hall gave to Brown in Christmas of 1884. And on the face of the watch is Brown's wife's portrait. It's the only good photo I have of her, actually. And so, these two men, they were friends. They came here on this journey together, and I feel like I'll have an incomplete story if I don't have that lot as well, if I can't tell people what that lot was and why it's important. So I'm trying to work that out. Things have got more expensive in my area in the last, we'll say 3 years.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. So let's say you get this property at some point. What kind of things would you dream of doing on it?
Well, if money were no option, if it wasn't a problem,
build the house again.
Okay. Yeah, if I had a cool $3 million,
you have the machinery. You could redo all the trim.
It's not the trim that's the problem. The trim, I think, wouldn't be too hard of a mountain to climb, realistically. The mountain is the stonework. So the front of my house it's limestone. It's 8 inches thick of limestone that they clad the front of the house with. Beautiful. Of course, limestone does get beat up over the years, and so it does need some work, and I'm slowly fixing that. But that's a lot of limestone to be quarried up into, they're probably 15-foot by 8-foot blocks, and there's little seams between them, and they've just padded it all up. And that's not to mention the more decorative elements like the corbels. or the rounded bits. Somebody has to cut that. And milling wood is one thing, but I can't imagine what milling stone looks like. I don't even know anybody who could do it. I'm sure there's somebody, but I know it isn't cheap. And I tend to be a bit of a purist with my house here, not in all places, but almost all places. So I'd want the house to be put back the way it was. And I have the blueprint, but I mean, even in brick, I mean, it's 3 rungs of brick all the way up. The foundation is almost 2 foot wide of limestone.
They made these old
It's
houses
just
solid, because even the farmhouses got 18 inches of solid stone.
Yep. And so they're tough. They're really tough. If you maintain them, they'll last forever. These things were built to last, and they will if you maintain them. And most of the maintenance is like 30 or 50-year maintenance. There are some houses that were built in the 80s that don't look great at all. But anything will last if you maintain them really well. But I think most of the maintenance here, it's high upfront costs, but it will last longer in the long run. I think these houses are actually cheaper to maintain, but the upfront cost of something like tuck pointing or slate, let's say.
Yeah.
But a slate roof will last 100 years.
And you're fortunate enough to be able to do that. If you had to hire somebody to reform those corbels on the front of the facade, there's your budget right there.
You're probably talking around 25,000 if you get somebody who likes you to do it. And they will probably use cement. They'll probably use the wrong product. There's a guy I know in town who's amazing at what he does. He just, in his work, is incredible. He's better than I am at it, but he's using cement. Well, at some point down the road, that cement will pop off from the limestone. It won't hold. Limestone's a lot softer of a material. So something's got to give when you have these expansions and contraction with summer, winter. At some point, one of them's going to give up, and usually the limestone will lose. And then you'll get a bigger crack.
Just under the bay windows, there's these corbels, and there's 3 windows on 3 sides. So you are able to, by process of elimination, because a lot of these corbels were gone. Some of them were gone, and there isn't a full one there, but you have enough information to get it dead on all of those.
Yeah, I just made a template. There was one that had one really good side, and I was able to trace that side, cut it out of plywood, and then when I went up to the first one, just stick it against the side, make sure that part of the wall I was using was good as well, so it was actually straight. And then you would, because you build this stuff, it's a limestone mortar is what it is. It's specifically made to repair limestone. So if you took a crack out of something, or something was spalling like my walls were, which is when the limestone becomes flaky and just comes out, this is what you can use to repair it. It doesn't have any binders in it, so it has no glue, no oil. It's literally just stone. It turns back into stone. And so you have to build it up like a sandcastle. And then when you overbuild it, and then you scrape it back once it starts to harden up. And so you literally sculpt it back into its original form. And with that little template, I got myself pretty close, and then just kind of eyeballed the first one. And then the second one, I just use a longer, because they're in a line, I just use a longer piece of metal, I think I used a long ruler, like a 4-foot ruler,
level,
and just came down and cleaned it up.
Oh, okay. He's talking to somebody else. Yeah, you guys have to check this channel out. You really got to go check this channel out, because he can explain it till his face is blue, but until you see him actually work on some of this stuff, it's amazing. And he'll do it in time lapse, and you can see the whole process, and I love it. I love every bit of it. And he's even been working on some furniture as well. Like he did, that was a desk or a table? It was a desk.
It was a desk.
And what did somebody tell you? They said, why don't you leave it rustic? And you said, why?
Well, so there's, I guess, a lot of schools of thought with, well, anything antique, anything old, let's say. You have like the very antique-y roadshow style thought, which is if you touch any of that old finish, it isn't worth anything. Well, in my eyes, I'd prefer to see it as the original owner saw it. So you can use original materials to restore things. I think that's better. I think obviously if you take an antique piece of furniture and you cover it in shellac, or not shellac, polyurethane, it does look a little weird. I'll give people that. But for me, I don't. I guess there's. So you can leave it alone. You can what's called a arrest the decay. You can basically stop it where it's at and put things on it that don't let it go further, but don't take anything back. And there's what I tend to do, which is depending on how bad the finish is or how bad something looks, assess things. If it's not in bad shape, you don't need to strip it down. But for this particular table, the finish was heavily, heavily alligator on the legs, so you can no longer see the beautiful wood. It was all one solid color at that point, and it wasn't paint. It was just the finish had given up. And a lady had used it outside for plants on the surface of the table. And so she had put these crates, like milk crates on there. So they had like the grid pattern of her watering her plants for like a year. And the table was starting to kind of cup a little bit, the desktop. Luckily not so bad that I couldn't sand it mostly good. And then I used oxalic acid to get all the heavy staining off of it. But I think it came out beautiful. But of course you have people who, how dare you touch that finish? How dare you? I look at everything when I take it apart. Is there a manufacturer on here? Like, does it say Tiffany and Co. on it? No.
You wouldn't go
not that big of a deal.
You wouldn't restore a 55 Mustang and leave it rustic.
Some people like to do that too.
Bring it back to its former glory. Now, your intention is when you get this house done, or it'll probably never be done because you'll always be working on it to some degree, but you want people to be able to walk in and feel like they're in the heyday of that house.
Well, it's a time machine, but even more than that, I want to make it true to form, to where it was originally when the house was first moved into. I guess the goal I keep in my mind is I would love for the original owner to be able to walk into this house and recognize it as his house, not my house. So I try to keep my decisions to a minimum and let the house choose what it needs.
Maybe Charles Brown is just waiting for you to finish it, and then he's going to say, "Get out."
It's going to come on back. I think we can live comfortably side by side. It's a big house.
Then you just tell him, well, who's going to continue to maintain this place?
Yeah, right? You're not doing it.
You can't even pick up a chisel. Yeah, I love it. I love stuff like this. And like I told you, I was watching your channel you started probably about 6 months before I did on my channel. And I don't know, you did something I didn't get whatever. How am I saying that?
I think it's probably just good fortune, man.
I didn't figure it out like you did. You must have figured it out. I haven't figured it out yet because
I still haven't figured it out. I don't know what I'm doing. I just make this up as I go along.
There is really no category for fixing up a Victorian. Everybody loves knowing about that kind of stuff. So I would say it's a very popular genre.
Well, I think the one thing that I think maybe people started because it's interesting, but I think a lot of people have stuck around because, I really do care about this house. Like, I really do care about the history of it. I want to know the stories. I'm very much so, if these walls could talk, and I'm like, well, I'm going to force them to talk.
Without
I want to know
the house.
Exactly. Like, I deeply care about these things, and I'm very encouraging to like my city. I love St. Louis. I think it has a bad rap. Some of it deserved, some of it not so deserved. And I want to see this city shine. Like this isn't like a a house project so much to me is an art project. This is a way to build a time machine, and a way for me to build a legacy. Like what I see in my head happening when I'm dead in the ground. Like I want my grandkids to come in here and be like, my grandpa put this together with his bare hands and he made it happen. How cool is this? Like it's something that I can pass down. It's something that I can project out into the future, you know? And so I think that's really impactful to me. And I'm really doing it for myself, the kid in me. You know, when I was a kid, and I know we've discussed this before, I loved the Titanic, and I know you did too, or do too. And so for me, this is like walking into the Titanic. It's like kind of getting to live that. And I know the arrows are slightly off. But there's parallels here. You know, I have a grand staircase. How cool is that? So I'm doing it for like the inner kid in me. And hopefully I get to share this with more people like that, more children, more people who just love this stuff and maybe don't have the opportunity to do what I'm doing, but can come and can visit and can stay and can take photos and videos and be able to experience this place and touch things and be a Victorian for a day. And I don't know, I have that rare opportunity where I'm able to do that. And the even rarer opportunity that people are actually interested in it, which is incredible to me.
You talk about the Titanic. There is literally nothing I can find about the Titanic that I haven't watched yet on YouTube.
Gets a bit frustrating, doesn't it?
And if they have a video that has one iota of different information than I already have seen, then I've got to watch it.
One of these days, I'm hoping they get in that swimming pool. I want to see what it looks like. I know they got the Turkish baths, and it was really cool when seeing that.
Yeah, that was. And those tiles are still on the wall.
Oh, it's so cool.
How could those tiles still be on the wall? You think that all that saturation eventually would cause them to just fall off? I mean, it's amazing what's
tougher stuff
and what isn't there. Like the stained glass windows are still there, and they're not broken. You would think with the impact that it took, but they were talking about how it was almost that water created a cushion.
There was a big hole in the back of it at the end too, so the hydraulic pressure had plenty of places to escape without having to push the windows. Again, that's just my guess.
Talking about the jarring when it hit the bottom, and you think it would have racked them and broke them, but a lot of those stained glass windows are still there, and that's amazing.
It's cool. It's like
hanging down.
I mean, I think that story has a little bit for everybody, right? Which is why it's the Remember Today. There's the exploration. There's the creepiness of the wreck itself. There's all these personable stories where you kind of see yourself in somebody's shoes. There's the folly of man, overcoming nature. There's the bluffing about how it's unsinkable. Like it's a little bit of everything, and I think it's really an incredible story. And then, of course, the art and the architecture of this thing. So it's like I said, it's a little bit for everybody.
And there were a lot of businessmen and women on there that were like Colin Brown that were traveling, and the stories are very interesting to me.
Very much so. Very much so. It's a cool story. A tragic one, of course, but I mean, I say cool in a it's an interesting story. Probably that's a better word.
We all got to die sometime, though. That's the way I look at it. And so, I mean, Colin Brown built those houses and they're gone.
Yeah. And they left quite a paper trail. They left a legacy. I mean, I have a bunch of the machines sitting outside.
That's a perfect segue to what I want to talk about next. You have anything more to add about the Titanic before we move on?
No, let's keep going.
Okay, I want to talk about the machinery and how we were discussing the parts for the machinery was actually originally carved as a wood carving, and then that would be the positive, and then they would make the negative mold, and then of course pour steel. But
yeah,
do you know the name of what do you call those wood molds? Because that's the way they did all kinds of steel parts and products. probably somewhat
I
today.
guess it would just still probably be called a mold. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I know the process. So, so Mr. Brown, the guy's house I'm in, he was the pattern maker. He was the guy who would make everything in wood, and then depending on the size and the scale of things, you'd have to know how much the iron would shrink or steel, because some pieces were steel. And so you'd have to know the contraction rate of these materials to make for sure when you had all the metal pieces, they would all fit together. So it was actually a very precise job. It was the highest level of carpentry you could achieve, or basically the highest, or one of the highest. And so you would make these blanks, you would press them down into sand, much like how we would cast things today. It's basically the same process. And yeah, you would create the mold and give it some kind of agent to release, and pour your molten iron or steel into the mold, and a machine piece would come out. You'd have to clean up all the seams and the lines and all that stuff, and you'd have a piece. But I don't actually know what the molds would be called. It'd be really interesting to be able to find one someday. I don't even know exactly what I'd be looking for, or how you would identify it as something that would be Hall and Brown. I mean, the factory, I think, closed in 1935. It was casualty of the Depression. It was liquidated then. Who knows what was able to be salvaged from that. I'd love to find a piece like that, though, because I think it'd be massively interesting.
This is the house we're talking about, and there was two of them right next to each other.
You can actually see the other one in the photo in the corner. And there's a little carriage block in the front of the house on the right that says Hall on it. So that means mine would have had a matching one that had Brown on it, but it'll be just out of frame. So I got to get a carriage block at some point.
Are you telling me that, and here's the house. This picture's from when you first came into it, right?
Yeah, the garden was kind of going crazy up front. I think I just pulled the vines off the front before that photo.
Yes, he's doing an amazing job of bringing this house back. And I just wanted to show a couple of pictures so that people know what they're
what we're talking about. It's seeing is believing, right?
Now, a lot of stuff is painted like this, in probably there's so much paint on there you can hardly even see the detail on it anymore.
When you clean it up, though, there's a lot underneath there, and it's intact, so that's what's nice about it.
Well, at least the paint preserved it for you.
Absolutely. And I think they used to do some kind of layered paint on there. That way it was like a thicker kind of paint, like chalky stuff, that if you ever needed to repaint it, you could spray it with water and it would come off easier. So a lot of that's on there too.
Here's
those tiles.
About, and get with me afterwards and I'll tell you a guy who you don't necessarily have to hook up with him, but you can watch him and learn how to repair that damage.
That chip.
Yep.
That'd be good to know.
Because yeah, I would never have guessed how to do it, but he used the airbrush when he's done, and then he clear coats it afterwards, and it looks like it never happened.
That would be amazing. Luckily, it's not like the really, really delicate, like painted on sections.
Yeah.
Luckily, it's just the corner, so that's helpful. But I guess I would be willing to almost live with the chip too. It's, in a weird way, it is kind of like that slight imperfection that shows a history that somebody thought it was a good idea to steal them. And we actually do think it probably was an employee of the gas company, because that's who bought those tiles, or that's who the guy that sold the tiles to the guy I bought them from was a guy who worked with the gas company. So it would have been interesting. They were in here turning the gas off, making sure things are shut down. Those are some mighty fine mantles you got there.
I have to apologize to the people in the chat. I mean, this stuff is just too fascinating to be able to keep up with the chat as well. But I see you guys there. I see you. full-blown country. Belt Loop 29. And Drew. Treasure Hunter. I just wanted to name some of these people. Cindy Brown. And my moderators for protecting my channel. Okay. So, the mansards, is it mansard?
Yes.
Is that the proper way of saying it?
Unless you're French, and then it's something. I don't know. That's how we say it in the U.S.
Now I see that you're working on the crown molding that goes. It's not the top of the mansard, but it's what, probably about 3 foot down from the top.
You mean like the cornice?
Yeah, with all like who was that?
That's probably like 11, 12 feet down. It's a long way.
Oh, is it?
I guess that's one thing. Yeah, people don't understand how tall this house is. It's probably 48 to 52 feet high at the very, very top. It's a big house.
Okay, we're talking about the let's see if I can do this. We're talking about this level of trim right here.
Yes, the cornice.
Yep. And you've been working on that recently, where you're trying to replicate that because that obviously the old is damaged. What
Some of it's just straight missing.
Oh, it's just missing?
There's some of it that's just missing. But the squirrels have gotten out in it a little bit, and then we had some pigeons living in there this summer. Squirrels and pigeons. The pigeons aren't probably that bad. The squirrels are, bad words. I don't like them. They're really, really mean to a house. They will dig through wood, beams. They've not been kind to the old girl here. So we've been getting the squirrels out. We actually had to cut down part of my lovely locust tree outside just today, actually, to stop them from getting out there. But we've been getting new millwork done. Oh, my bathroom. That's my one room that looks really good.
I should have thought about the fact that I could show these pictures right on the. You want to see this stuff better? You got to go over and subscribe and check it out.
Or the Instagram works as well. Just the Second Empire Strikes Back over there. If you want to see just the photos of what the house looks like and a lot of the things I've documented, that's maybe the better place to look at photos, let's say. But if you want to see processes, YouTube is definitely the area to check out.
Oh, let's talk about this.
My newel post lamp. I don't think there was one there originally, but that's one thing I'm allowing myself, as again, a fan of the Titanic. I don't want a cherub, but I do want that newel post lamp. It has that look, that elegance to it. And I know that's Art Nouveau. Art Nouveau does exist at this time period, but it isn't quite as in vogue as other styles, let's say, at least not in the US yet. But, it's something that people would put up when the house was paid off. So if I'm making this game in my head about timelines and stuff, let's say they paid the house off in 5 years. Well, Art Nouveau was really big in 5 years. So I put that up there. But I am going to install it on a cap. So when I'm moving furniture up and down the stairs, it'll be easy. I'll just put a plug inside the newel post. We have to pop the lamp off, move it to the side so it's safe. And when I want it back on there, I can pop it back on. I can also then exchange newel post lamps or put a simple ball up there, depending on. So I'm making that modular because it is actually an addition to the house. But the newel post was completely missing. So unless I can get a photo of what that newel post looked like, it's kind of, who knows? I got a square base. I know it was square at the bottom, but I don't have any or I have no way of knowing what it really looked like. I am still working on photos though, so maybe I'll know.
And you have another one that's smaller than that, don't you?
I think I have 4 or 5 now. Estate salesman. Sometimes if I find $100 newel post lamp or just one of those Art Nouveau Figaro lamps, it's coming home with me.
Well, I'm sure they'd look great anywhere in that house when you're done with it.
I mean, that's my nightlight in like every room.
And You know, the newel post isn't original to the house, but it has a lot of the same characteristics as the rest of the house.
Absolutely. It matches a lot of these little, well, actually right here, put them the wrong way. These little guys here are all over the house. These little, I forgot the word. It was like I believe a Greek word or a Roman word for these little things. Rosettes is what you would call them if they're up in the corner, but there's actually a little, this is like an older motif, a classical motif. And so the newel post mirrors that. And so it is kind of interesting. It's made of the same wood. I believe the staircase and it are both red oak. If not, then they're both at least oak. I should be able to match colors. Oak being a much brighter wood than the parlors, which are cherry. So it has enough of the characteristics that I am completely fine putting it there. However, if I do find a photo of the newel post, which Pat, the veterinarian's granddaughter, if she has photos, which she says she does, I don't know if the newel post, but she at least has some of the mantles. I do prefer to have the original put in place, but it is a rather, I imagine the one that was there was probably pretty close to that.
Yeah. Well, those are amazing. What was that I was going to say? Oh, well, we were talking about the crown molding at the top with the mansard ceiling, and we never got to talking about it. What's the deal with trying to get that done? I'm sure you would have had it done by now if there wasn't a reason why you haven't had it done. What's going on?
So the guy, I don't have the ability to mold that stuff myself. I mean, the top bit right before the gutter box on the mansard out there on the cornice, it's about 8 inches wide and about 2.5 inches thick. It's got a big rounded profile. To put that in perspective, the piece of wood that the guy hired had to mill was about 100 pounds. It's about 60-ish now. So they're big, beefy boards. They don't look that big from the ground, but when you have them in your hand, you're like, oh my. So it's very skilled work. And so the guy I found to do it, he's an artisan, but he takes some time to get it done. His name's Eric Laval. He's really, really good at what he does. I've seen him make rope molding, spiral, either way you want. Like, he can do incredible things. He's done a lot of very famous houses here in St. Louis. And he runs a lot of this stuff on Hall & Brown equipment. So all this molding was made on Hall & Brown stuff. So he was the right guy for the job, and I was willing to wait for him. Now, I've just now gotten almost all of the woodwork we need. There are still some of like the soffits and the gutter box and stuff like that I need to get back up there and get a measurement on. The problem I'm having right now is my lift is acting up. Mm-hmm. So we actually own that lift, so I have to prepare it so I can send it back. So it's being a little funky. There's some potential electrical issue, or something isn't talking very well. Who knows exactly what it is? I know it's not a hydraulic issue because everything seems to be happy there, which seems like it'd probably be the more expensive one to have to fix. So I'm just trying to get enough money to be able to do that. I need to call a guy, but I soloed these hoodies recently, and I'm kind of waiting on those funds to get into my account so I can then pay to fix this thing so I can continue the process. And that's been delayed for a month and a half, which is, of course, frustrating because weather only is so good for so long. Before I can't do that. I can't do it in the winter. Or I can do some stuff up there in the winter, but I'd like to have more done than I have done now for sure. And the dormers, which are obviously the windows up in the mansard part, they're the area that's really bad right now. One of the caps, the triangle caps up top is really shifted a lot recently. And I've been trying to get up high enough to it to really figure out what's going on there, because it's getting scary and I don't want it to fall off the building. I've also looked into the possibility of I know it'll be ugly for a while, but of buying like those old billboard advertisements that people have. They take down the old advertisement. And it's really thick mill plastic. It's like a tarp, but
Yeah.
much thicker.
In
And
fact,
they're much cheaper.
we have some signs on our property that are like that, where the guy actually rents the space and he'll do those tarped signs. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But
Now,
they're really nice for tarps, and so I might throw one of those over the mansard totally, hopefully with the ad pointed inwards and not out. It'll be ugly, but it might save the day a little bit come winter.
I was watching a YouTube channel that is building a house that's underground, and all these layers they have to put on, and they were using those sign tarps all over it before they would bury it.
I mean, they're cheap and they're really, really thick plastic. So
yeah. So the crown on the top, what is that called?
the cornice,
wrought iron.
or are you talking about each individual piece?
The wrought iron that's supposed to be on the top that is not.
Some people have called it a widow's walk. From what I know, it's always been called cresting. Widow's walks were, I think, a place a widow could actually walk. So I don't think it would technically apply up there because she'd have to climb out a window on the second story roof, put a ladder up to the third story roof to get up to that section. So I think it's just called cresting. Luckily, again, the builder, I talk about Eric Laval, he knows about that company that manufactured it. He knows for a fact what company did manufacture it. And so we're currently in the process. I forget the company's name off the top of my head, but he's found one that's pretty close to it. So what I need to do now is find a catalog from that company from the era, and I guarantee I can find the exact dimensions of what size that cresting was in the exact shape. Then to get it back to being perfect again, I have to send the schematics or make something in wood myself, like Mr. Brown would have, and send it off to actually some Amish guys in Pennsylvania. They're the best people to do metal casting these days.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, when you go to put that on there, you'll know that you've done a fair bit, because that's probably it's probably the last thing on the list to do, because there's so many other things that have to be done.
Well, when it goes up, I have to have a lightning rod, because that metal has to be grounded, because you're sticking metal pretty high up in the air up there. So you want to be quite safe about it. So yeah, I'll have to wire ground wire all the way back down the side of the house. But I can't let the old girl go without her crown. And it's a very defining feature for these Victorian houses, especially the Second Empire ones, is that metal cresting on the roof. It just creates this beautiful, like really a tiara. And it's just gorgeous. And it needs to be like, I've passed on opportunities to buy really beautiful cresting for very inexpensive prices because it's not my cresting. It will cost me a fortune because I need it to be the right one. That one photo I have of the house is like my curse and my blessing, because everything has to be right to that photo.
Do you see that kind of cresting, or even if it's not the same style, but do you see it still on the buildings around you?
Yeah, not directly around here. There may be some examples, but what happened in general with all of that kind of ironwork, even the fencing, is a lot of it got torn up and torn out for the war effort during World War II. They said to everybody, hey, if you have scrap iron, if you have scrap steel, give it to us. We need as much as humanly possible. And then ended up using even a fraction of it. So a lot of these houses lost their old pieces. Plus there was very little interest, I think, in like these houses at that time. They were seen as old, and this is also the time where you start seeing a lot more art and, let's say, horror films that start referencing the old Victorian house as the scary one, specifically Second Empire and Queen Anne style houses got a really bad rap as these old, drafty, scary, ghost-ridden, haunted, awful pieces of architecture, or that they were like too many pieces of architecture blended together, and that it was ugly and it wasn't clean and smooth and sleek. You're getting to like very streamlined, modern. And then, of course, after this war, World War II, people didn't really want to live like that anymore. They think the old people caused the war, so they wanted to be more modern people. They wanted new things and new ideas. It was kind of like the end of the old world, let's say. So you have a lot more new styles emerging, a lot cleaner styles. And these things weren't really cared about. So nobody cared about the crusting. Those things all came off and went into the garbage heap, scrap iron.
I'm just looking for a picture because it will illustrate what I would like to talk about. Hopefully I have that. I know where to find it. I'll find it because I sent it to you. Oh, that's not you. Let's talk about this a little bit.
Oh, the Lustron houses. I love those little things. Like, so what a Lustron house is, for everybody who doesn't know. Maybe people know about the Sears catalog houses. Obviously, like you would buy a house in the catalog, they'd put it on a train, they'd move it over to your house and drop it off. This is kind of like a slightly later, so from 1947 to 1950, actually it's 48 to 50, they made about 2,500 of these things. They were going to be the new house of the future. They were modular, and essentially they were all metal. The inside walls, the ceiling, the roof was all porcelain coated enamel, or porcelain enamel coated steel. And so your walls were magnetic, and they had these very, retro futuristic kitchens with these amazing cabinets, pocket doors. They were very loud because it's metal on metal. So you have that problem. But it was this interesting kind of way of building a house. And of course, it's directly after World War II. Everybody needed houses. They needed houses as quick as possible. Huge housing shortage at the time. And so, these it was just a kind of one of those newfangled ideas that didn't really catch on. So they built about 2,500 of them. There's 1,200 left in the United States. And I find them absolutely fascinating. Victorian architecture is something, of course, I really do love, but I love all different types of architecture. Some I despise and some I absolutely love. And I think this retro futurism is, I don't know, it's a compelling era because of, you have this kind of new pride in the United States, this new kind of fervor and enthusiasm about what the world will be, with this kind of looming underbelly of like, Soviets got the nuclear weapon and, all this kind of stuff that's kind of bubbling under the surface that kind of takes off in like the 60s and stuff like that. It's just, just under the surface, but there's just too much enthusiasm at that point to let it out. So, it's interesting. What's the hardest part of the restoration so far? That's a really good question. The mansard roof is definitely a tough one because working 45 to 50 foot off the ground, especially in the summer, was not fun. But I wouldn't say necessarily it's hard. It's hard because of location, not because of the process. Learning plaster, how to do lime plaster was definitely a bit of a challenge, I would say. Heck, even running electrical lines because I don't want to tear out more plaster than I have to. You run really goofy runs all the way around. Just not direct routes at all. That was actually pretty challenging. I don't know. I guess I don't really think of anything necessarily as hard or easy. It's just overcome the challenge. Everything's a puzzle. I like a good puzzle. So maybe if it's hard, it's actually more enjoyable in a way. You feel more accomplished, once it's done. So yeah, I guess probably the mansard roof would probably be it. But I'm still doing that right now, so it's really fresh.
Oh, so back to this house again. Oh. This is an actual house that I have seen, and I took the picture. We have this Chautauqua Institute of Art, and they have all these lake type. I don't even know what type of a house those are. But this was the only one in the whole institute. And they were talking about how somebody thought it was going to be all the rage to have them start building these houses in this gated community. And that was the only one that ever made it in there. They voted it out, but they kept it. They kept it as a historical story. Oh, and
I think they're cool.
The next part of that question is, you actually might have one coming along.
Yeah. So something that maybe even a lot of my own viewers don't quite know is my father. We do a little bit of real estate. We do. It's okay. It's fine with me. We do a little bit of real estate on the side. It's more of his thing than mine. But I also go when I consult, and I've worked on many of the houses and here and there, and just dabble with things like, yeah, hey, do that, hey, don't do this, kind of what style we can, because I know a bit more about style. He's pretty good at it too, but we bounce ideas off each other. We are a team in that regard. And one of those houses came up, and we have actually been talking about a Lustron house for years, because it's such an interesting thing, and there's not very many, and they are really cool, if not weird. Like they're another little bizarre fixture of Americana, let's say. This thing that just never took off. But they're still part of it around, and they are really interesting. You're not going to find another house like them. So we had the opportunity, and we're currently in the process of trying to get one of those. And again, we want to try to make it into a place people can come and experience, because again, it's a cool little piece of Americana. It's fun. And we want it to be a time capsule, kind of like my house is a time capsule. I like the idea that too, like when I have children, which hopefully that's coming somewhat soon. We can live here in 1890, and then when I want to go visit 1949, I can go visit 1949, and another place I can go visit 1974. Like I like the idea of having these little time capsules that you can walk to and really feel that you're in that place at that time. Yeah, it just, I don't know. It's an interesting a place. It is. I don't know. I find those little architectural anomalies really, really fascinating, and I'm quite curious about them. And going and walking to the house is cool. Like if you want to hang a picture, you literally take a hook magnet and just throw it at the wall and throw your picture on it. You're good to go. And I will say too, as far as durability is concerned, that roof on that house is 75 years old. Never leaked. There's no leaking in there. As long as because it's just like you would make a stove. It's enameled or porcelain enamel steel. But other than slate, I can't say that about anything else. I mean, the house has the original metal roof on it. It's really interesting, They were durable houses. They were just really loud inside.
Well, like I said, I love all types of houses and how they're made, and I watch stuff like this all the time. Not so much anymore. Well, I do. Every once in a while I take a break, but the community, trying to keep up with my community of the homesteaders and watching their channels and stuff, they keep me busy watching those things. So some of my channels that I used to watch kind of got pushed aside.
Well, I mean, I know it is, right? If you discover something new, you go down a new rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's like I sit around and watch like history videos, and it's never like one specific era. I guess I don't really care for like British and French Louis and Georges, and show me the pretty buildings. Yeah, all for that, but like I don't really care about who did what at what time in those histories.
I would definitely be interested in seeing more on Holland Brown. I was looking for YouTube videos on it, and I might not have been looking for the right thing, but I haven't seen a whole lot.
There's not a huge amount. There are little bits here and there, I believe, on I think the guy's name. It's either Keith or Kevin over at Vintage Machinery. I think there's a few videos on his, but there's also videos where he's taken apart contemporary, or contemporaries of Hall and Brown competitors, their machines that were built around the same time, and realistically, they're fairly similar. And so just watching those videos, I think, helps you understand what these machines were doing. Or there's also on Vintage Machinery, he does tours of workshops, some of which were line shaft or belt fed, big flat leather belt. And line shaft is like the power system for an entire workshop. So there's some of the shops that are still running on that today, which I find massively, massively interesting. Especially if you can get a chance to see one of those in person. I think the sights, the sounds, the noises, the smell of the wood, like it's magical. Wood and iron, it's cool stuff, man. I really love it.
Before we started this live, I said, I don't know how I'm going to get all the questions I would love to talk about in this one live. And you said, well, maybe we'll just have to do another one some other time.
Yeah, we can do that. That's absolutely fine.
I would love to, because there's still so much you can get into just the story of Hall and Brown. We barely even touched on it. But let's close it out with this story or conversation. You visited, in one of your videos, you visited an actual shop that has Hall and Brown equipment.
Yes.
It's actually on the, I forgot the name of the what's the system? The
line shaft.
Line shaft.
Belt and pulley system.
Yeah.
It's what is it? Neosho Valley Woodworks in Humboldt, Kansas. Oh, what's the guy's name? Oh, that's gonna haunt me because I think about it. Like I've talked to this guy a bunch recently. Oh, I can't quite think about it. Either way, he's been working on these systems for about 40 years. He bought an old mill that had a bunch of the equipment still in it. And so he decided, he was a cabinet maker at that point. But he decided that he liked the older machines better than the new ones that he had. And
who says I don't read the chat, John Wiggs? I'm going to read every one of these chats later.
He's going to go back and review it all.
Continue. I'll deal with John Wiggs later.
But essentially, he decided that he didn't like his new machines as much as he liked the old ones. And him and his brother went through and restored every single piece of equipment in that mill. Now, there was like some mess where he ended up losing the mill because he couldn't get a loan at a certain point or something. But he kept up his passion and his love for these machines. So he's probably restored over 100 of these machines, from various things, from axe handle makers to planers to joiners to I think at least 5 or 6 band saws, multiple lathes, huge post lathes. He can make just about anything in his shop. It's about 2,000 square feet of pure antique machinery bliss. And every single one of them is ran off line shaft, which means one engine powers, well, I think it's 2 sides of the shop. So 2 electric motors power his shop. And so he flicks one switch, the whole room comes to life. And then you have on each of these machines 2 wheels. One is like a drive wheel and one is a flywheel. So when you want that machine on, you switch it from the flywheel, you shift the belt over and it goes onto the drive wheel and that machine comes to life. And they work like anything else. They're certainly not OSHA approved. He's missing 2.
So die on that.
He's missing 2 digits on his fingers to prove that.
Let's say that again.
And he's missing the 2 digits on his fingers. So from here up on both of his middle and his pointer finger on his right hand. Somebody messed with the fence, which is the part that you butt your wood up against to go through on his joiner. That's why you don't work in a workshop like this with 2 people. You work alone. Maybe somebody hanging out in the corner, but not touching anything. They just forgot to put that fence back, and he wasn't using a push block, which is a safety thing. Always use a push block. I always do, even with modern equipment. And he pushed that wood, that fence gave, and he lunged forward, and his fingers went in the joiner. They didn't come back out.
My dad and I
Be careful.
My dad and I were watching one of those line shaft the name just slipped my mind. Lathe. It was a lathe.
Yeah.
And the guy, the handle to shift it or something like that was, you have to put your hand between where the belt is going and switch the handle.
Look, I mean, most of them didn't come with the handle to switch it. You had to build that yourself. So it means he just built it in a really, really, really silly way, a dangerous way. His shop's actually set up pretty good, but you do have to duck under belts. The same thing applies to a modern shop. Don't wear long sleeves or something that's dragging. Don't have, I don't know, like your pants tied with a shoelace hanging way out in front of you. You have to watch your feet in a shop like this because there are a lot of spinning pulleys. They won't stop if you get your foot in them. So, there are concerns, but you have to pay attention. Don't go build a chair drunk or any what impaired. If you're not feeling well, maybe don't be in there. If these machines, people were working with them in the 1800s, 1850 all the way up until 1940, and still a lot of them persisted past that. And I would say most people made it out of those occupations with really no damage. But you just need to be mindful of your work environment. Don't sleep on the job, let's say. And they can operate just like a modern machine. I don't think I would teach children how to do something on like a bandsaw that doesn't have a giant, a cover over it. Which those
shop.
It's not a shop class necessarily. That being said,
not a good place.
Confident adults, I would mind teaching things on too. I wouldn't mind passing a lot of the skills I have down to people.
Please sign a waiver when you walk in the door.
I'm thinking about taking like some of that tape with the caution lines on it and having like a bounding box in one section. And it's like, you cannot reach outside of this box. I'm going to turn it all on, let you all see it. Don't move.
Hold your hands.
But
that's what my dad always said. Sit there and fold your hands.
More or less. Just be careful. But yeah, that place is absolutely incredible. If anybody's ever in Humboldt, Kansas, I heavily suggest stopping by there. He's an incredible guy. So mad at myself for not remembering his name off the top of my head. But what he's done there is I think no short of a miracle. He's really, again, it's a time machine. When you walk in there, it feels like something out of the past. And because it's authentic, it's real. You smell like this, it must have been the same smell as a workshop back in the day, the various types of wood mixing with the oil and the grease, because all the bearings and the line shaft, you have to grease them consistently. So there's just this energy about it. It's kind of like a steam engine versus a diesel engine for a train, right? The diesel might hum and buzz and it kind of sort of feels alive, but a steam engine's like a living, breathing thing. It's like this visceral thing. And you feel that when you go into the shop. It's not just buzzing of machines. It's the whirling and the slight, tinkle and crack of like the bearings. Like I don't know. There's just something about it. And I don't know. It's magical. To me personally, it's magical. And then to know that the guy who built my house, this was the world he lived in, I think it's really cool. It brings you closer to the story. And so I have a very deep, I think, personal connection with it. And I can't wait to build more pieces of my house with the man's machines. I think that's, who has that opportunity?
And you actually have how many pieces do you have? You have the planer and the bandsaw.
Planer. Right? I have a bandsaw. I have another bandsaw that's a smaller one, but it's not Holland Brown. It's a Crescent, but same era. I have 2 table saws that do 2 different functions. I am about to go get a third table saw that's better than the other 2 I already have. So we'll see what happens to those exactly. I have a lathe, and then I have this tiny little 60-pound miter cutoff thing. It's an interesting little thing. I'm not exactly sure why you need it. It's just something you would shave off like a miter cut. So if you need just a little bit extra cut off, and you would come down on like a guillotine on 2 sides, but it's at a 45. And it's also hollow brown. So that makes what, 6? Yeah, I think 6.
Wow.
And then I have a few other things from a few other makers as well.
Oh, before I wait to total end, because I don't like doing this at the very end of our conversation because it gets cut off. But Outdoor Adventures with Carrie is next week, Wednesday. And she'll be joining me. I just had a really good talk with her this afternoon or evening. And yeah, next week you got to tune in and watch Carrie with me.
Make it happen, guys.
So that was a great live. I really enjoyed. Well, we've talked a couple of times already, pretty lengthy. The first time was about 2 hours. We talked about this stuff, and we're like, oh, this, and oh, that.
Like, we probably would have talked more actually if I hadn't been getting married this week. It's a lot of setup in that.
Yeah. So this is great, and definitely, I'd like to probably have you on after you get a little further along in this house and see what that journey's been like from now to then.
Well, we'll definitely do that then.
And if you have people stop at your place anyway to see, I don't be too surprised if I don't get with you and stop and see it myself when I go back to shoot thing next year.
That's fine.
Because
you should probably give me a text just at least a day
before
I know you're coming. Because sometimes I don't notice people out. I wouldn't even notice them being there.
I would make plans far in advance so you knew that I was coming, because it's actually an event. Shooting is an event, and they've had 3 of them, and I would assume they're going to have one this coming year where I've met a lot of these fine people in the chat. And so we actually stopped in St. Louis and took pictures at the Arch when we went in May. There
you go.
August and May. So I was only a mile from your house, if that.
Maybe a little bit more, mile 0.4.
Distance is deceiving because you can see the arch through your window upstairs.
Yeah, on the 3rd floor, and then on the 2nd floor roof, and that's just because shifting through houses a little bit, you can kind of see little bits poking out here and there. 4th of July was fun here.
Oh, I bet. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining me. This is great. I love having channels on that building different types of buildings. I would love to get that guy that does the what do they call it? Aircrete domes. That would be interesting.
Well, start searching around, message them up. I guess you never know how somebody is until you message them, right?
I couldn't believe it. Well, it was a pretty lengthy one explaining exactly why it would be good to be on my channel for you to come on.
No, but
you took it. You said, yeah, sure.
Well, I've been on like another podcast, like Great Seance. It's like ghosts, and I don't really do ghosts, but I have something that's kind of ghost adjacent, I guess. No, I like talking about these things. This is my passion project. So yeah, and I think it was a great time. I had a lot of fun. So
it really was. And yes, we'll definitely probably do this again. I don't know, 4 or 6 months, somewhere around there. See what else you've accomplished, and I'll be watching you. And I hope a lot of these people in the chat will go over and check you out.
It's a good time on the channel, guys. There's I definitely put out some pretty decent videos, and so if Victorian architecture is something you enjoy, it might be something you want to check out. If not, no worries. Glad you were here for tonight.
And thank you very much. Thank you all for showing up in the chat. And my moderators, thank you for protecting my channel. Thank you for joining me. And have a good night. We'll see you next week with Carrie, with outdoor adventures with Carrie. Good night, everybody. Oh, stay on.
Guys.
I'll talk to you for a second.
Okay.
Bye now.
See you guys.
And broadcast.